can't get on there yet. So anyway, but I want to introduce Jennilyn, guys. I want you to understand how amazing she is. This lady is remarkable. She's got such a great heart. Jennilyn is a registered nurse. She's also she's learned how to do the amino acids through me. So she does that, and she has her own business. And she's also starting her own hypnotherapy school. And I think of her as a very dear friend. And Jennilyn, you're going to have to fill in the difference because I'm a little bit scatterbrained because I just got my phone working after 3 days. So.
Oh, I would be happy to fill in the gaps. Switch out my glasses. All right. So Shelly Jo touched on a few things. So I've been a nurse for about 35 years. In that, I've also raised 6 children. I have 2 amazing grandchildren, and I love to talk about them, but I will not today. Just know my favorite title is grandma. But I currently, my nursing has been such an interesting journey for me. So I just want to spend just 2 minutes and just let you know I've been a nurse for 35 years, and in that as a nurse, I dealt a lot with pain, and that pain led me into hypnotherapy, which then from hypnotherapy in 2012, I created my own private practice. I was still working as a nurse part-time and doing my hypnotherapy full-time and doing all the things. And then in 2015, I was diagnosed with MS. And MS was very interesting. Those of you on here that are familiar with MS, for me, you know that there's multiple different stages, and I was diagnosed with primary progressive MS just right from the get-go. And I was bedridden. I lost my ability to speech. I lost a lot of neurological function. And so neuroplasticity became very, very important for me. And I realized at that time that as a nurse, I would be cared for if I just went down the path of traditional MS, that I'd be okay. People still love me. But I also knew as a hypnotherapist and working with the brain that I was seeing miracles every day in my office, and why not me? And so I started delving into myself. I've created a team around me, including hypnotherapists. The first thing was to figure out, why did my brain choose this? Why did my body and my mind choose MS? And the most empowering day of my life was the day that I discovered and could see the pattern of thought that took me from point A to point B, and how I created this problem called MS. And it was so empowering because I thought, if I am this powerful that I can create MS in my body, so debilitating that it's leading to death, well, then I can create and make a different choice, which I did and which I have. So through a lot of therapy, and ketamine has been a big part or a small part of my personal story with MS, because it has helped me and assisted in the neuroplasticity of my own mind and my own brain. And then, so I took a hiatus from working as a traditional nurse and just focused on my hypnotherapy for about 5 years. Was introduced to Shelly Jo and her amino acids and what she was doing there. And we became not only friends, but business partners in the amino acids. And then I was recruited in 2021 to work at a drug addiction clinic here in Brigham City, Utah, is where I'm located. So this little clinic, we're just a small town, and yet I had no idea the drug problems that we had in this small town and in our county and community. I've been here now for 3 years, and ketamine therapy is a big part of what we do here. Maybe it's a small part, but it does add and it does help. So I want to start in with the ketamine and how I use it in my clinic. So I specifically here at my clinic, it's called Beacon Recovery Drug and Alcohol Addiction Clinic. We're an intensive outpatient clinic. So that means that we're Medicare, Medicaid and approved, and that we work with insurance. And we also take private pay, though that gets kind of expensive. And I work with doctors, I work with nurse practitioners, I work with psychotherapists, and then we have peer supports. We have a whole tier system, right? And as a nurse, I do the ketamine and the monitoring with the ketamine treatments. And then I do hypnotherapy. So I combine those 2 degrees. And what we have found, I'm going to start with what ketamine is. I don't know if, so ketamine is a drug. It's a psychedelic drug. It creates a disassociation within the body and the mind. The way that we give it here at Beacon is in a very small dosage. It's like a troche, and the highest dose that we give is 75. Now we used to start at 50. We give it for 2 weeks at 50. That's to build brain tolerance and make sure that it can be tolerated by the client. And then we increase to 75. We give it at 75, and they're with a therapist while they're getting this treatment. And we give it as a troche. I started to say that, but we put it between the gums and the cheek, and it just dissolves during the treatment. It dissolves in about the first 10 minutes. The effects of the ketamine last for about 45 minutes to an hour, but we monitor that patient and we don't let them drive and leave the clinic within 2 hours or 120 minutes. And that's just to make sure that their vitals are all good and that they're all back to normal, because everybody is a little bit different. And they can have different effects with how if they did not eat breakfast, then I can mostly expect that they're going to experience nausea, and they're going to have a heightened sensitivity, and they're just not going to feel very good after. And I've had 1 or 2 clients that have vomited, but that's because they've taken it on an empty stomach. Or I had 1 client that had just eaten a really sugary donut right before the ketamine, and that's a really bad combination. So I just say those things so as I proceed, you understand how we are giving it. And I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, which I apologize for. We will have time for question and answers, so we can fill in the gaps. But I'm going to back up that ketamine specifically we give it for as an antidepressant, so it helps with depression and suicidal tendencies. For the FDA, those are the only 2 things that the FDA has approved ketamine therapy for. Some people have given it for other things, and ketamine was first known as a horse tranquilizer, right? And vets would use it. And then it was originally developed during the end of the Korean War, and then into the Vietnam War by the military. And the military was looking for some way that they could quickly save their soldiers, and they could, without having to intubate them or make them unconscious. And ketamine is a great drug for that. And they discovered that. Now, ketamine is also it's a natural substance. So, but in the natural world, it comes as a fungus, and it's very hard to reproduce. So in a lab, they were able to chemically reproduce that molecule, that fungus, and then they created ketamine as we know it now. But it has its basis in a very natural substance, that comes from mushrooms. So ketamine, we give it with a therapist. We only use low dosage, like I stated. And while they're with the therapist, I like to, I'm going to give you the simple definition of how I think of it in my brain and how I explain it to my clients of how it works. Most of you, if not all of you on the screen, are much more educated than I am and would know and understand the brain science behind it. And I'll touch on that a little bit, but that's not really my expertise. So I think of it as we have our neural pathways, and if we're giving it for depression, then depression is just like it's a habit, right? So I think of our body as an electrical system, and we have the electrical system of the brain. And just like the electrical system of the house, when they put those electrical cords, to keep them safe, they put them in PVC pipe, and that keeps them going in the right pathway. Well, our brain, as those neural pathways are going through the white matter, it creates like a funnel, a tunnel, and those cords are then almost like PVC pipe. And it becomes very difficult for the person to have to branch out and have a new thought. And in drug addictions, there's a reason that they've chosen drugs, right? There's a reason that they're addicted, they're looking for comfort. And when they get comfort from meth, and that helps them feel successful, and they're looking for more. Depression and suicidal tendencies, like I don't have a patient here that doesn't have depression and suicidal tendencies. So it's very easy, but these are pathways that are very strong in the brain. And what the ketamine does during therapy, as they're taking that and that dissolves up to the brain, I think of it as it dissolves the PVC pipe, so that dissolves the nerve, helps the white matter, softens it in the brain, so that they can have a new thought. And in that new thought, then that allows new neural pathways and neuroplasticity to really take hold and work. And then we can build on that, and they will have aha moments. Now, the way that we're using and what we have found and the best practices for ketamine, we give it in very small doses, micro dosing. And I have my own theory of why that is better than the IV clinics that are coming up. With the IV clinics, they're giving you more, you get it faster, they have to be monitored. They have to stay at that clinic for at least 3 hours before they can leave and are even safe to drive. They generally have more of a psychedelic effect, and they're not giving it in high enough doses that would create an unconscious state or even a psychedelic state. But most of those clinics are not giving it, they're giving it as a drug, and they're allowing the patient to take their own thoughts and then have their own thoughts. Now, here's the danger with ketamine. It works very well on the positive to allow that person to have new positive thoughts and new neural pathways on the positive side. But if they are, we're talking about drug addicts and people that are depressed. So if their normal is to go to the negative and go down that tunnel of negative, and if they're taking ketamine on their own, the danger is that it will enhance the neuroplasticity and strengthen the negative and depressive thoughts, just like it will strengthen and enhance the positive thoughts and new neural connections on the positive side. So that is why I am such a strong advocate of having a therapist there with the patient. If a clinic does not offer therapy with the ketamine, they run a risk of that patient becoming more suicidal and having terrible dreams and even having worse symptoms, right? So now when we started with the ketamine, the way we give it, and we have a pharmacy here in Brigham City that we've contracted with that compounds the ketamine for us. And wherever you're at in the country, you can find a pharmacy that will compound what you need. And if you have any questions about that, I can send you information to the pharmacy that we use, and they could get you connected to somebody that would do it in your area. So we start the ketamine at 50 milligrams. We used to go up to 125, and we would have a tier where we would go 50 for a month, and then 75 for a month, 100 for a month, 125 for a month. And we found that at 125, we did not get more benefit for the client, but they did have more of a psychedelic experience with it. And drug addicts, that's what they seek for. So it just was not effective, because then we were adding and strengthening and bringing up memories of past drug highs. And it's not effective. And so what we have found to be the best practice for how we give the ketamine, we give it with the troche. We start at 50 milligrams for 2 weeks. We go up to 75 milligrams for 6 weeks. And then we stop it for 2 weeks. The purpose for stopping it is the brain needs time to repair and to move forward and to really evolve with the neuroplasticity. And when we take a break every 6 weeks, that lets us know, how is it working? How is it helping? What differences are we seeing from 6 weeks ago till now? And so I track that with our clients, and I'm watching. And I just had a client that just had finished his 2-week break and started up again yesterday. And I said, okay, Ben, what have you noticed over the 2-week break that you did not have the ketamine? And he said he had more emotional outbursts. He's military, and he's working through PTSD from military PTSD, and then he added an alcoholic addiction to that. And so he had a more difficult time with depressive episodes and an emotional outburst with his children, that he'd noticed that within those 6 weeks, he was able to control his emotions. And he has like 5 kids. And so with knowing that, let us know that, okay, we need to continue with the ketamine and even adjust it. And if we need to adjust it a little bit more, and he needs to just be on 75 for longer, and we not take that 2-week break right then we'll extend that. And our nurse practitioner that we work with, it's all flexibility, but we're monitoring and we're tracking, is it working? And of course, that let us know that the ketamine is really working, and it's making a difference in his mind. I wanted to talk about my own personal, another side effect of ketamine that is, and it's not talked about very much, but ketamine is excellent for pain. It is a natural anti-inflammatory. And in those low microdosing, as we give it, everybody always feels a little bit better after. And the reason why is because it helps with the anti-inflammatory effect of the body. Now, my own personal experience that I had with ketamine, I wanted to know what my clients was like anyway, what my clients were experiencing. And then I had read an article, how ketamine, the more I studied, and how it helps with the neuroplasticity and with MS and everything that I'm doing with my own body and therapy and working through MS, I said, let's try this. Let's see what's happening. And I'd love to find the right doctor that we can put together a research study for ketamine with MS. Because I notice the weeks that I'm on ketamine and I just take it at 50. I tried going up to 75 and it gave me a high. If you get a high off ketamine, that is too much. The effects of the ketamine really show up in that person's life 24 to 48, even 72 hours later, because takes time for the brain to adjust and grab hold of these new thoughts and make those new neural connections and the neuroplasticity. But the ketamine, I've been using it now for about a year on myself personally. And I'm doing things that 10 years ago I could not do. 10 years ago, I was wheelchair bound, and mostly I was in my wheelchair, my bed. I couldn't drive. And now I walk. I still use my wheelchair, but only when when my husband is in a hurry. Doesn't want to wait for me. I do use a cane occasionally, and I still have some balance issues, but I ride horses. I walk, I talk, I'm very active, doing things that I didn't think that I could do, that I wasn't doing 10 years ago. So the ketamine for myself personally has really made a big difference in the neuroplasticity with the MS. And eventually we'll get a study put together that we can really take a deeper dive and look into what ketamine can help on a whole broad spectrum for MS. I think I'm not okay. I'm going to open it up for questions and discussion.
Hey, Jennilyn, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, my daughter struggled with addiction for so long, and I saw this, and you and I had discussed a lot. And when I told her that this might be what could help her, I mean, she's done well now at this point, but was that to do the ketamine to help with the depression and stuff. But she said, she just felt like she was just going from one drug to another. So that was her concern. And so she wouldn't do it.
So it works very differently than any of the other medications, and it wears off the body. The side effects of it are that you can plan to sleep really well. It does make you a little more, you want to sleep because the brain's repairing, right? So the brain gets tired. But it's not overwhelming fatigue. It's not like that. You just get tired. So what would I say to her? I would say to her that she just needed more information and the right doctor. I would not recommend for someone like that to go to an IV clinic and get an IV. One, it will bring up, if they were an IV drug user, it brings up all these memories that you don't want them having and recreating, and you don't want it solidifying any of those memories. Whatever they're thinking about in those initial 45 minutes to an hour that they're taking the ketamine is what is going to be enhanced within the next week and with the neuroplasticity. So it definitely requires, if they're going to do it on their own, they need to be a well-balanced person, and they need to be studying a really good book or listening to some really good high energy, positive, something meditative in nature. But they have to take control of that themselves. I've seen it go both ways here in my clinic.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Gal.
Yes, Elaine.
Oh, did you want to go, Julia? I'll go after
I
you.
can wait.
Okay, all right, I'll go. Thank you. I really appreciate your story, Jennilyn. So one question I have is, have you ever known or worked with or heard of ketamine therapy being used for people with TBIs?
Yes, yes. And a TBI is so similar to in the brain injury with MS that I've experienced.
Ah,
It's very effective. But even with that, with the TBI, whatever that person's thinking about is going to be enhanced. And that's what's going to be strengthened. And we're wanting to strengthen the positive. And so just be aware, if they have a TBI, a known TBI, that it's going to help introduce that. Now, one of the therapies that I did early on that helped me, it started and woke up my brain, was music therapy. And because I had, anyway, with my brain with the MS, I had like 7 masses, almost every area of my body neurologically had been affected. And the left side of my brain had just decided not to work. And it was music that woke up the left side of the brain, but it was very intentional in that music. And combining that for a TBI with the ketamine, who knows where I would be now if I had started ketamine 10 years ago, early on my process. I don't know. I'm doing very, very well
Thank you.
now,
All
but it
right.
could really be, I see so much potential there. It would be fascinating for someone to do a research project along those lines. And
Yeah.
there's so much research going on with ketamine.
And so one other thing real quick related to what Shelley Joe was just saying. I worked with a client, myself and Jeff Jones last year, who she did ketamine therapy initially after getting out of detox. She was a fentanyl addict, and did the amino acid therapy, the nutrients, like the whole shaboo, was doing great. And about 8 or 9 months in, and the signs, we were starting to see the signs, because I am myself a former addict, alcoholic, so I can see signs as well. And what happened was, as far as like, what we call here the 3-legged stool, the biochemical, the psychosocial, emotional, and the spiritual, she was not doing the other 2 legs of the stool. The spiritual, I will say, and the therapy or whatever that she was avoiding to deal with some things that she had never dealt with. And she went back out, and she is still out. She's struggling and trying to quit on her own, quote unquote. So anyway, it's just striking to me always the importance, just like you're saying, of that 3-legged stool, that full, go ahead. So anyway, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for that. Julia.
Hi there. Thank you for coming. I have a couple of questions about just to get clarification on some of the things that you said. In terms of your tracking the process, do you have, an actual checklist of things like we do with the amino acid therapy, deficiency symptoms?
So mostly I'm tracking vital signs. So I track vital signs before, I track vital signs after, and then I see that client the next day. after their ketamine. I'll see them twice, 3 times during the week. So I'll see them the day that they get their ketamine, then I'll skip a day, and then I'll see them again. And I'm tracking behaviors. I'm tracking thought
How do you do
process.
that?
Just through, I don't have an official form. That's a good idea for me to do that.
Yeah, I
But I
really
just
encourage
ask
you to
them
do it.
about where, how are they feeling? What's been happening? How did they deal? How have they been dealing with situations? What I generally see is so perhaps, Julia, it's all subjective, and my tracking is more subjective than objective because of except for my vital signs, when I'm doing physical, this is what's happening, with your vital signs, your heart rate, blood pressure, things like that. But objectively, subjectively, I ask them like about situations, and they start thinking differently when they come in and they have a new thought and they react. And the same situation that happened the week before, they exploded, and happens again, and they are able to it's just calm waters, and they can think clearly. And we start seeing these patterns change. That's when I know it's really working. And
So,
when do
so you're evaluating like how much it's working to help you decide what they need to do next in terms of dosing or whatever. So like we use a 0 to 10 on the neurotransmitter deficiency symptoms. And that's essentially what you're trying to do, is figure out how much better could it get by asking how are they doing with same things they were dealing with the week before. That's really helpful. And then you talked about that the benefits are excellent, and then you said excellent for pain. And then, at another point, as you were talking, you said a little bit better. So is there a range of pain relief results that you see?
if they're having I had a gal that had a broken ankle, so she had a lot of inflammation. She would walk out of the office after ketamine therapy, and she would have 0 pain for 2 to 3 days after. Now
0.
her pain tolerance was pretty high, but she'd had surgery on her ankle, and so there was trauma there. So she had a lot of inflammation. Now someone does have a client with fibromyalgia, and she just notices that she always feels better for about 2 to 3 days after. It just carries over, that she'll start feeling better. And she says, I know I need another, I'm ready for another dose. I need another treatment. And we
Does
only
she
give it
mean that
once a
she's
week.
gone? Does she mean that she's gone back to where she was prior to the prior treatment, or that?
You know what? I haven't had anybody go back to the original level of pain
Great.
since. It's always gone just down, and it's either gone down and then back up a little bit, but it never goes back up to that 10 level of where they were when they first came into my office.
Well, that's extraordinary. Wonderful. Do you work with people? Can you work with people privately
I
outside
do.
of the? Okay.
Now, with ketamine, if I do privately, I can't prescribe the ketamine. So I send them to my doctor that I work with and say, you need to go to him and he'll prescribe the ketamine, and then they come to me for the hypnosis and the therapy part of it.
Great. And this last question has to do with addiction. I'm just thinking, in terms of, the Alliance, whether you have trained any other addiction professionals to do this work.
I'm
beyond
now
what you're doing
working,
today?
I've hired one more, I have another nurse that's working with me right now. And I recently became certified so that I can teach and certify other hypnotherapists that are nurses. And that's my goal. I'm putting together a school right now, a hypnotherapy school specifically targeting nurses that will be working with the ketamine and doing what I do. So that
So
is in
would you be
process right
willing?
now.
Would you be
What was
willing
that?
to take non-nurses who wanted to work in the addiction
Absolutely.
field? Okay, okay,
Absolutely. And say Shelley
okay.
Jo also has a school that she has just started for
But she's not
hypnotherapy.
doing ketamine.
No, she's not doing ketamine.
So I'm specifically interested, in the ketamine.
And the ketamine portion, like, and Shelley Jo and I have talked in collaborating because
Great.
the ketamine portion of it, it's very easy to train. That I could train, like I could do a 1 hour, 2 hour, I don't know, probably a 3 hour certification that could certify somebody that was a hypnotherapist to be able to work with the therapy part, to be able to administer ketamine. I mean, Shelley Jo and I could do that.
Well, that sounds really
But
exciting, and Shelley Jo can obviously move forward on that, but maybe co-sponsored by us, by the Alliance. That Shelley, don't you think that would be possible?
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I think that's a great idea. Yeah,
Well, let's
like that.
let's really think about that. Could you talk a little bit more about the suicidality? I'll tell you where I'm coming from. We rarely see people in our Zoom setting who are suicidal, and so the emotional issues that we deal with typically are tools, the amino acids and diet and whatever counseling they need and so forth, is very effective. But when it comes to suicidality, it appears to be a whole other brain generated problem. And occasionally lithium orotate is helpful, but I'm thinking of someone right now who we referred to her Kaiser plan, which does ketamine, but it is the infusions and it is the long sessions. And she initially had she's got a bipolar,
Mhm.
with very, very long and significant depressive episodes. And so she had a fantastic response that lasted for 6 months, 6 to 9 months. And then she had to get off of it because there was some other medical thing that happened and she had to stop everything she was doing. And when she tried to get back on, it's basically done little or nothing. And she's back to the same thing. She's had many, many years of therapy, and she's continuing therapy, not only individually, but with her father, who's helping to support her. She's a woman who's almost 50, and been struggling with this her whole life. So I don't think she's ever had the opportunity to do the microdosing. And I'm just wondering, what your sense of it would be in a situation like this.
Well, the fact that her problem is continuing to recur and has come back tells me that now I'm speaking as a hypnotherapist, that it's not all been cleaned up, that there's still a hook, there's still something there that is a pain point within her that then triggers the thoughts and then creates and leads her down that path of suicide. So I think that microdosing could be very, very effective for her with the hypnotherapist that could help guide her and clean up those pathways to really, because obviously there's something that it's still reoccurring.
Right. Now, what happened was, 6 to 9 months of really almost no depression. And then when she went off of it for a number of months and then tried to go back, and I'm just wondering whether you've heard of that before, that when people are on the intensive stuff and they interrupt it, or I've been hearing recently that if they do get benefit from the infusions, that it really tends not to last more than a year.
I have heard that, Julia. I do not know the research on that and the background, and where I don't work with the IV doing the intensive therapy like that.
Yeah. Okay. Just thought you might have.
I'm
Okay,
not
last
sure.
question. Could you talk to us about some of the other addictive drug uh, responses, clients with at your treatment program, for example, well, or your private.
Well, in my treatment client, like I work with everything, heroin addicts, fentanyl. Fentanyl is terrible. Fentanyl is worse than meth, and now all meth coming, and all meth in our experience has been laced with fentanyl. And in my little community, we've lost, I think, 20 deaths from fentanyl deaths in the last probably year. It's the most common thing. It's the most common. And so anyway, meth, fentanyl, heroin. I don't think there's anything that we haven't seen and that I haven't worked with at this point.
I was just asking you for some examples, of
And
substances you haven't
how it
talked
works
about.
with the ketamine.
Yeah.
I would tell you I had, so one personal, it's not personal it's not my story,
Okay.
but my client, he had been an alcoholic, or had been an addict since he was 14. And he's now 45 years old. And he's now been clean for 11 months. It's the first time in that 45 years since he was 14 years old that he has been able to be clean. And the ketamine therapy really has added to that and helping him see a different path. Then we also do bioneurofeedback in our clinic, and and the psychotherapy, and he did do, we also work with Sublocade, if you're familiar with that. And so there's other
No, I'm
things that
not.
are happening there, but he's been on ketamine now every week since he was here. So for 11 months. And of course he gets every 6 weeks, we take a 2-week break to let the brain recharge and see how we are doing effectively and let them cope and handle on their own. And then we do it for another 6 weeks. But he's really been, that's a real personal story right there, that he's in his own overcoming and being given new hope. I also have, I hear some really sad stories.
Well, wait, could you hold up regarding him? What was he addicted to by the time he got to you guys?
Oh, by the time he got to us, meth was his first drug of choice, but then alcohol, heroin. He did spend time in jail. That helped him detox. But his main drug of choice was meth. And then he was a drug dealer too. So he was dealing it, he was selling it, he was using it.
Okay.
And bringing stuff over the border from Mexico.
So has he been doing the ketamine for the entire 11 months?
We
Except
don't
for
let
the
them
2-week
start.
breaks?
We don't let them, once they come into the program, we don't immediately start them on ketamine. We take a month. They have to be here a month before we even start ketamine. And that's so that we get a baseline of where they're at, what their needs are, and Are they really wanting it? And are they committed? And then we get started on
some
the
of these
ketamine.
people, you're able to use amino acids with as
Yes,
well, right? And
yes.
how do you see the ketamine and the aminos working together?
It enhances, and anything that we can do for them nutritionally just helps. And the ketamine aligns very well with the amino acids. And for myself, I use the amino acids and the ketamine. And my favorite is the tyrosine and the DLPA. I use the 6 main amino acids that Shelley Joe offers.
So personally, you
Personally,
found with the
it's
MS,
enhanced with the
the
MS.
MS,
Yes. Yeah.
tyrosine and DLPA.
Yes.
Interesting. I have a friend who has MS, and she does very well with tyrosine. And so it's good to know that that
It's
might
my
be
go-to for fatigue.
yeah. Um,
So
so okay, go ahead. So you were going to talk about but my question with him and with any client is, so after a month they get on the ketamine, they take 6 weeks, 2-week breaks, and then so with him in particular, were you altering the amount of ketamine that he'd take over time?
So he would get 50, we go 50 for 2 weeks, and then 75 for 4 weeks, and then we take a break, and then we repeat. So when
Oh,
we
you go back to 50?
we go back to 50.
Ah,
And the reason for that, and our doctors can, with him, he was kept at 75 for a little bit longer. And in fact, our doctors he's part of what helped us establish the protocol to drop it and keep it at 75, because we started moving him up to 100. And even we did like a 1 week at 125, and it just it had almost an explosive, it had such a strong psychedelic effect in his brain that, it was certainly a high for him. And that's not what we want.
right.
If they're feeling high on it and they're feeling that dissociative effect of it, that's too much. And that almost overpowers the mind. And then it almost is like it sabotages the long-term of healthy effect, because they get focused on the high and where they've had a history, and that's what their body liked, right? It reignited that memory and brought the cravings stronger.
So what have you done since that point?
We've just we took him back down to 50, and he's at 75, and we've kept him on that 6-week program. And he really was part of the reason that we said, okay, this is our best practice. This is what we have found over the last 5 years that they've been doing ketamine at this clinic. This is what works best. So we don't, and it would be different if you had an individual that was like someone that was just working with depression and they did not have the psychedelic history with the drug abuse, then they're not going to have those implanted memories of their drug high, right? To create a negative effect or bring up a negative memory. We just do our best to keep those at bay. That's what we want to just let fade away in the mind.
So what would you say his treatment plan should look like going forward? So he's been 11 months back and forth, mostly with 50 to 75. Do you have some sense of, long-term what the
So he's moving. He's one of ours that was with us for 5 days a week for almost 6 months. Maybe he's been here 11. We just moved him about 2 months ago. We moved him to 3 days a week. And now he's getting ready. He'll have another month, and his plan is to move to 1 day a week. He'll only see us 1 day a week, and he'll get ketamine 1 day a week. And we'll do that for another 6 months. And then we have an aftercare program, because then he'll graduate from us. And as part of our aftercare program, he can continue to work with our medical doctor.
So
And
do you
with
have any
ketamine.
sense of, after a year, say, do you keep track of people long enough to know?
This one, because I think it was closer, but there's one on in Newtown where like we went up to.
Hello? Do you have any sense of over time, how long they tend to, or is it lifelong that they need some sort of ketamine?
Most of our clients, like
Uh-huh.
99% of our clients, when they graduate, they're done with ketamine and they don't ever
Oh.
need it again. And then
Okay,
we
that's
track them because we have a strong aftercare program. And so we track
great.
how they're doing. And so far, so as a clinic, we've been a clinic with what we're doing for 5 years. Our percentage of people that go through the program and graduate that relapse is 4%. That means we have a 96% success rate,
Ah,
combining everything that we're doing.
And
And
so how
we-
many of them graduate? What percentage graduate? Do you know?
Most of our clients graduate. I couldn't tell you an exact percentage, but I would
But
suspect about
majority.
75. The majority graduate because we have there's a lot of peer pressure that we create here for them to really look forward to that graduation. And a lot of my guys, a lot of my clients are as part of their parole. They have to graduate to get off of parole. That really
Okay.
helps, right?
Yeah.
It's part of that
It's like
peer
the drug
pressure.
court.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I want to let other people ask questions, but I just want to thank you so much for coming and for the work that you are doing. And I'm really, really grateful to you, and I hope that we can continue to work together to make a 4% relapse rate a reality. In
Well, you're
more
welcome.
programs like yours that are actually working with people who are not necessarily motivated,
Yeah.
except by the legal system. So thank you.
You're welcome, Julia. Thank you. Mary, you had a question.
Yes, I do. So first off, I wasn't taking notes when you first started. So what's the name of your clinic?
It's called Beacon, Beecon.
Okay. And you said where in Utah?
And we're in Brigham City, Utah. We're
Okay.
currently opening up a clinic in Heber.
How do you spell that?
Heber is Heber.
Okay.
Heber is by Park City. You might know where Park City is in Salt Lake, by Salt Lake.
Ah,
And then we're opening a clinic up in Montana. So those things are in the works. And my role is
I'll work in Montana for you.
Oh, you do? Where do you
No,
live in
I'm
Montana?
in Colorado now, but I'll get licensed. I
That'd
don't
be
mind
great.
going live in Montana. or open something in Colorado. Be glad to help you out there too. You kind of answered this question, but I just want to clarify. So obviously, they're in an intensive level of care, but part of this is doing ketamine once a week and then meeting with you like 2 other times a week when they're in that intensive stage.
Yes.
As well as what they're doing. Okay, so like one session and then some debriefing and checking in to see how the hypnotherapy and the ketamine are impacting them.
Yes. And then they're seeing on the site, seeing our psychologists 2 times a week. So they see me 2 or 3 times. They'll see our psychologist 2 or 3 times, and they have our peer support, our case management people, group therapy. They're here for 4 hours a day for 5 days a week to begin with, for at least 90 days. And then we weed them off as they meet their mile markers.
Cool.
What do you
Um,
think is the minimum, sorry, Mary, what's the minimum amount of therapy or that kind of intervention you think an individual would need if they're getting ketamine? Like say they're not in an intensive IOP, for instance, how much do you think is the minimum?
Once a week, once or twice a
how
week,
close-
if they're fairly stable, and just so that when they're doing the ketamine, that they're getting the ketamine with a therapist. Now, if they're somebody that's stable, like we do have, I have some of my staff that uses the ketamine and they'll use it on their own, but they use it with their, like they're emotionally stable. So they can take the ketamine and they're reading a good book or they're listening to meditative music and they just have it set up that for that 2-hour time period that they're doing ketamine, it's a Friday night and they're doing something pleasant and they're in one place. Takes a high level of trust to be able to have them administer it like that on their own, and the doctor, and because they have to be, and there are also people that we're working with, like it's our staff members that are, most of our peer support staff that we have, they work here because they're recovering addicts, right? And maybe they've been clean, they have to have been clean for at least 2 years before they can work with us. But most of them have some kind of a history in their own recovery story of drug and alcohol addiction, and they find the ketamine is really helpful for them. So someone who is emotionally stable, but just needs a little extra help, the ketamine is very helpful in the way that we give it. And then we do trust them to give it on their own and take it on their own. When I'm taking it, I take it on my own at home on a Friday night or Saturday night. I just mark out the time right before I'm gonna go to bed, and that's just my quiet time, and I'm reading or I'm studying, I'm doing something to progress my mind with the ketamine.
So do you
Does
also
that
need
answer your question?
so do you need psychotherapy? Like if you're doing it for an individual, do you think that meditative music is enough, or do you think they would, and how soon after ketamine do you need to get the psychotherapy? Is it within the 2 hours or can it be during the week?
We do it with, during, like with the patient, right? But there are some clinics that they will see them the next day. I feel
And what
like your most beneficial is within that 45-minute window when they first get that initial dose of the ketamine. And that's because that's when you're planting those new thoughts that then the brain connections can grab hold of.
And
So
you're
it's a
talking
kind
about hypnotherapy specifically, right?
It doesn't have to be hypnotherapy specifically.
can be CBT? Like, yeah, what kind of therapy do you need?
It could be CBT. It's what therapy, whatever works with that patient.
So it's to suggest new ways of thinking. So that therapy session is about, for your brain is suggestive with the ketamine. Now let's use that plasticity of your brain at this moment to have different kinds of thoughts, pardon me, that for the subsequent week or whatever length of time, the brain can just sort of work on it in quotes. Is that the idea?
So when I'm working with what I love with the ketamine, it creates that disassociative just enough that I can hit those pain points. I can go into those PTSD triggers and we can resolve the PTSD without the emotional involvement of the body.
Wow.
So it becomes much easier. And then they can look at it objectively and see that, oh, this is really what was happening. Oh my goodness. Well, that's not true. And we introduce those new thoughts and then a whole ton of forgiveness, right? I do lots of forgiveness work. But we can hit those pain points. That's really where the ketamine becomes so effective, is hitting the pain points.
And your clinic is all outpatient, is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's all outpatient.
Amazing.
this work in a
Ye-
telehealth situation? When you're not seeing the patient?
I think it could. It takes a high level of trust. And realize the ketamine, it's, I can't prescribe ketamine. I just administer it under a doctor's care. So they have to go somewhere else, get the ketamine, and then we can then I can administer and do the hypnotherapy. Through telehealth, it could work. It just takes more, and that other person just has to be highly motivated to have it work and be effective. Oh, any other questions, thoughts?
This is Julia again. You've mentioned pain, physical pain, and now you're talking about pain as being kind of the key, the focus of healing in terms of the counseling that goes along with it. And so the fact that you use DLPA would make sense since it's targeted towards the endorphin or pain relieving, natural pain relieving capacity of the brain. But have you used DPA?
I have not.
So can I suggest that you do that?
You can.
It's much more effective, I would say, with at least 50% of our clients. We trial both. So it really depends on the person. We can't predict. But if especially if you have somebody where the pain is more difficult to relieve, that would be a good time to trial the DPA. Thanks.
Healing. Okay, well, it is 1:05. I know we've gone over a little bit. I just want to say thank you very, very much for this opportunity.
Yeah,
Jennilyn, thank you so much we appreciate you doing this. I think you're amazing. I love you, and what you're doing is awesome. Thanks, guys, for being here today. Just as a reminder, next time we are having Carolyn Rubin, who's also going to be with Julia Ross, and they're going to be talking about some amazing things that happened in California when Carolyn had a incredible program that saved California $20 million. So it's going to be amazing. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jennilyn. Really appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, Jerry Lynn.
Thank you.
How do we get out of here?